And we're live. Hi, I'm Mitch Weisberg, and you see along with me is my friend Sharon Laflamme. And I think there's going to be a lot of you who don't know me, and a lot of you who don't know Sharon. So, Sharon, why don't you go first? Why don't you do just a quick introduction? Like, who the hell are you?
I'm a product of childhood trauma, Mitch, and I have spent my life healing from that. So I help people that are consumed with fear and overwhelm. They crave control, but they're completely out of control because their nervous system is not regulated because it was brought up in childhood trauma, much like mine. So I help people find that nervous system regulation, come back into an embodied self. And also, I help people do that by coaching. And I also have an online course that I've worked with
Wow.
to help people do that foundational work because it's been my passion and pleasure to support nervous systems because our autonomic nervous system regulates every system in our body and much of our behavior and our mental state.
And we're going to be talking about how that trauma or those events, that very often things that happened early in our lives, uh, then stay with us for the rest of our lives, and then result in anger when something triggers us.
Yeah.
And then, just to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mitch Weisberg, as you can probably see on the bottom of the screen, and I work in mind shifting, which is all about staying resourceful or being resilient or collaborative, even though things get in our way. When we get triggered or when people disagree with us. And so, how do you resort back to being resourceful, resilient, and collaborative? And that dovetails really well with the work uh, you do with people with trauma, right?
Oh, yes, totally. Because I think a lot of people, I'm just going to propose this out to you people.
Hmm.
You might think that behavior is all about your thoughts, but I disagree. And I'd like you to get rid of any preconceived notions of that and maybe open your mind to the fact that there's an autonomic nervous system that runs our body that might be creating much of our behavior and our mental state and emotional state based on experiences that we've had growing up. And so if we could make our behavior just from thoughts, we'd all have the most perfect
Right.
behavior in
Yep.
the world.
Hmm. Yep. So why don't we just begin with like and something is hitting a microphone. I don't think it's me.
I bet my paper just hit.
Ah,
Is
okay.
it still hitting?
It's not hitting right now, but
If
the microphone got a little bit lower.
oh,
Um, but anyhow, I can hear you. So there it goes again. The paper. Hmm. Anyhow, so let's start with like the beginning. Like what with your work, because you know this better than I do. Like what is anger?
anger is like a primal, volatile emotion. And I love anger because it always lets us know that we've been violated in some way, maybe disrespected, injustice, victimized, maybe we've been betrayed, gaslighted. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen, but it's meant to be something that allows us to protect ourselves, to notice that you've been violated, and let's deal with that. But because it gets so intense, it's really scary for people. And we'll talk a little bit more probably about that. Is that a good enough
Yeah,
place to
that that's
end?
that's a good beginning. And what I'm thinking is, as you were talking, that anger happens before we're even conscious of what we're thinking, right? It's like an instantaneous thing. It's our survival mechanisms within our body, and those react in like hundredths of a second, whereas our ability to think about what's going on generally wakes up like a second or two afterwards.
Yeah.
So the anger happens first, and then it becomes an emotion. And in that sense, as you mentioned, it's kind of like a warning. It could be used as a warning, but
Mhm.
it can also take over. And so when it takes over, then our actions result from that warning, and we kind of automatically go into fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Yes, and any strong emotional activation
Hmm.
Like that will shut down our brain, which is why we get triggered or we react, because our ability to come into our prefrontal cortex thinking brain is immediately shut off for survival, because we just know we got violated. And so now we rear up that ugly fight or flight, and we get shut down from really thinking
Hmm.
processes. And a lot of that happens too, because in order to really be able to be thoughtful, we need a very matured ventral vagal nervous system, which we aren't born with, and we need it built. And that's kind of like the accelerator on a car. Like for me, growing up with childhood trauma, I didn't have secure attachments. So I didn't have a good ventral vagal. So I could be going along okay. And then if I got upset, it would be like the gas pedal on the floor. Boom. Because the ventral vagal is that nervous system's capacity, and the social, they call it the social engagement system, Stephen Porges will, with the polyvagal. That is our ability to slowly accelerate and feel twinges of irritation, and then maybe frustration, and then maybe I'm getting upset, and now I'm like over the roof in rage. But for those of us that didn't get a good ventral vagal, we don't have all that acceleration. We go right to the floor.
So I'm just gonna like back up just a second because you mentioned three different parts of our neural system, and I think that for the people listening to this, it would be very helpful to understand what their roles are. So you mentioned, I think, the limbic system and the emotional parts of the brain. You mentioned the prefrontal cortex, and then you mentioned the vagal or the vagus nerve. And so let's start with the limbic system. So what is the limbic system and what does it do? What is the prefrontal cortex and what does that do? And then we'll go to the vagal system afterwards.
Okay, so there's the limbic system, which is our primary primitive brain, and it's composed of hippocampus and amygdala and all kinds of things that work on our emotions. But the limbic system is also totally in the autonomic nervous system, which means we don't have control over it. It's processes like your heart rate, your breathing rate, whether you need to go pee or poop. It's just like having a baby or an animal. All the processes that your body does, sleep, arousal, your limbic system's doing, usually without your consent, because it has an ability to neuroceptively orient around you. It's always looking for danger. It's always looking to keep you safe. It's always telling the organs inside, are we safe? Send up messages to the brain. My stomach's in butterflies. I don't think I'm safe. And telling us how we're feeling, because the body is always talking to the brain and letting you know if you're safe. And that's our limbic system, much like a dog. He's sizing you up, and it's already decided if it likes your energy or not. We have the same capacity and ability if we build our ventral vagal nervous system.
Well, let's before we get to vagal,
Yep.
let's go to prefrontal cortex. So,
That
um, so if the limbic emotional parts of the brain are not sensing danger and they're not in this emotional arousal of anger, anxiety, fear, um, then our prefrontal cortex is able to process. And what does that do?
that is your thinking brain. That is your, not primitive anymore. Now we became human, and now we have the ability to process and have thoughts and think and make choices. And that all happens in the prefrontal cortex, which we pride ourselves in. And most people go around thinking that this is the end all. And in your work, which I'm so impressed and proud of, you're helping people know that there's parts of us that might not be able to have the best thoughts, and we may not show up in our best self because other things take over.
Right, like the limbic system. And
Yeah.
so if the limbic system is aroused, the prefrontal cortex can't really operate at full strength. If
Mhm.
the limbic system is calm, then the prefrontal cortex can do creative thinking, empathy, um, uh, executive function, critical thinking. It can assess new data, all the things that we like to think about that make us human, right? And then um, And then what about this vagus nerve? What does the vagus nerve do?
So there's two things that you're confusing. The vagus nerve actually is the longest wandering nerve, and it goes from all of our organs up to our brain. 80% of our nervous system is the organs telling the brain what's going on, how I'm feeling. And then the brain has 20% to say, start fighting. This is what you want to do. But the vagus nerve is simply the nerve. The ventral vagal is what we were not born with. So a baby has no capacity to calm itself whatsoever. It needs a ventral vagal nervous system, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system of the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system has sympathetic, arousal, fight, run, and parasympathetic, which is where we want to find rest and digest and calm, and our creative self, and the prefrontal cortex comes online.
So our ability to calm ourselves down is the central vagal system.
Ventral vagal, and that is what we want to build, but it takes a caregiver, a secure, attached caregiver that fulfills all of our needs, which is why people, let's just talk about why people might get angry. Because if we didn't get held, heard, seen, understood, loved, those are needs that our attachment needed to have. Sometimes when we're an adult and we're not being heard, or we're not being seen, and we're not thinking we're getting anything, those attachment wounds like roar up, like, whoa, like, and that's where some anger can show up.
And so just, I guess, how do we generally, and I'm curious, because if anybody can respond to this, I'm really interested to know from the people watching this, like, how do you respond to anger? But maybe then from you, Sharon, like, how do people commonly respond to anger? And how do they try to generally suppress or control it when it occurs?
So that is a really long question, which has a lot to it. But I'm going to start with a question to the audience and everyone. When you were little, if you got angry, which usually showed up as a tantrum, how did that go over? How did your parents respond? Because that is how we get repressed. Many times parents are just trying to stop the behavior. They don't care what's behind the behavior. I just want you to stop. So then we get punished or disciplined, and we learn to repress and suppress that anger. And that anger is just so wonderful for us, but nobody around us likes it. So we learn to stuff it on our own so we can show up with the people that we can be safe with. Because if we show up in this anger state, they're not happy. So that's one of the things. For me, and for a lot of women, it's not nice for women to show anger. And they don't even like assertiveness, which is acceptable in this world. But for a lot of women, that's not even acceptable.
Right.
Depending on your nervous system state. If I'm calm and relaxed and parasympathetic resourced, I can have this conversation and you're not going to feel unsafe. You're going to receive it. But if I'm upset and I'm trying to have the same conversation, but the words just...
Wait a minute, bitch, stop that, right?
Exactly, right. Is because all of a sudden, and this is where that autonomic nervous system is running the show, that other person feels unsafe. Just because you're showing up with a little fight or flight, or maybe a lot of fight or flight, but that sends that other person's nervous system into danger, threat, and now I have to protect myself. And so anger is just so provocative because you don't even have to say a word, but the body's like every kid knows when my mom is going to be upset with me. They can see it happening. We can feel it. And so that's why it's so important in our adult relationships that the teachers and the doctors and the judges and the parents know that this person can come to me as long as I'm a safe person. we can bring anything to somebody if we think they're going to be safe.
Hmm. So what happens to us then if we're constantly, I say us, and you talk mostly women, um, but to a certain extent, I'm sure men also. But um, what happens to women mostly uh, when they're constantly trying to suppress that anger? Although honestly, as a you can't suppress it forever; it's going to boil over at times. But when you're trying to suppress it, what happens? Why is that harmful?
So I do want to say something, because I think men, little boys, have a real bad rap because they're taught early. Men don't, you don't show up like that. You don't cry. Stop that. So they have the same experience. We're taught to stuff an emotion that's really meant to complete out of the body, be held, complete, and be gone. But we have to repress it. So what does that do? It sends all that emotion, all that energy, because we have cortisol, adrenaline, vasopressin shoving into our system. And now we're saying, I have to suppress it. I have to push it down. Well, all those chemicals and all that energy goes into your body and stays in there if it doesn't complete, which a parent is supposed to help you complete. Me, as a somatic experiencing practitioner, help people complete it, so that what happens? We start to learn maladaptive behaviors like perfectionism, people pleasing, OCD, addictions. It shows up as energy, a contraction, autoimmune diseases, pain in the body because there's so much contraction of fighting, and that's repressed. How many people have headaches and jaw and shoulder issues because it's still there until it gets released? So there's all kinds of physical issues. The body can't really.
So it's not just one. It's not like one can say, "Oh, something. If you're repressing your anger, you're going to have headaches," because it's just like somewhere that pressure gets released, and the pressure could get released in headaches. It could get released in autoimmune disorders. It could get released in your perfectionism, in your hyper pleasing of people, your fear that people aren't going to like you if you don't do exactly what they say. It manifests itself in many different ways, but it stems from the fact that you're repressing you're putting this effort in to repress your anger instead of writing with it, right?
Yeah, instead of feeling it. So in my work, we don't use head. We don't even need a story. We feel it. We don't fix it. We feel it. And when we start feeling enough to reduce that inner pressure, and our brain can come back online,
Hmm.
then we can think about it. Now we can talk about it. Now we can make choices. Now we can come up with a plan. But it's just like a 2-year-old having a fit. You cannot talk to them, or an adult in a.
Right.
They have to regulate their nervous system, and usually it needs help. And then the body can calm, regulate, heal itself a little, and the brain can now come back on board.
So one of the things that I'm getting as we're talking is that you when, if you say to a person, here are the things to do to stop being a hyper pleaser, or you say to a person, here are the things to do to stop being a perfectionist, you're really not getting at the root of the problem. So you're not gonna end up helping that person, or that person not going to be able to help themselves stop being a hyper pleaser, stop being a perfectionist, stop getting upset so much, stop getting those headaches. It isn't until you deal with the root causes and you learn how to really feel them and utilize them that you can then start working on what actually are the symptoms instead of those aren't the being hyper pleasing isn't the cause. That's a symptom of the fact that you've been repressing
That's
uh,
right.
your
And,
anger.
and you've been doing it for a long time. So this is really survival energy, which people don't understand until they've actually lived it, that my ability to live depends on this parent, and I can't break that relationship
Hmm.
by my behavior or anything. I need them so badly. So the energy in a little person is really strong too, because they haven't built a ventral
Right.
vagal where they have and they have an ability to have some flow. It's either I'm on board and I'm upset, or I'm not.
And
Eh,
if you didn't build that as a kid, unless you have somebody guiding you, you're not going to build it as an adult either.
Pretty much, because our society doesn't really welcome that. In fact, they reward some of the behaviors that, high vigilant, high learning. The left brain is very active, and with all that nervous system energy of survival energy, we work, 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 and so it rewards it. It doesn't reward somebody that shows up calm and relaxed and safe. But our society is now really showing that this culture of trauma and toxicity and being unsafe has created some really difficult people. People are having a difficult time, and they aren't aware, I think, that there's ways to fix this.
They're not aware that there could be better ways, that there are better ways. Although somebody like you, for example, and to a lesser extent me, can make them aware of, wait a minute, you don't feel this way all the time. How do you feel when you are burning on, operating on all eight cylinders? And then how do you harness that? Um, like, just, as an example, is somebody who hasn't gone through a program of really learning the self-regulation that we go through, your somatic experience in your courses, somebody, what's are there things that they could do in the, let's say, in the first 30 seconds of noticing their anger?
Well, once we start to build our nervous system, ventral vagal nervous system,
Hmm.
we can start paying attention to the early, less intense signs of anger, which really show up.
Hmm.
But usually we're so disconnected and we don't have that capacity. We fly. So what the work I do, which is on my YouTube channel and in our course,
How do you find it? How do you find your YouTube channel?
at Sharon Laflamme. And
Okay.
so I tell people, set your clock every hour, and then you go and check in. And what does that mean? That means I close my eyes and I drop inside and I notice how my body feels. What's my breath like? What's my muscle tension like? What's my temperature like? What's my heartbeat like? How do I feel? Do I feel anxious and stressed, or do I feel fairly calm and powerful? It's checking in so that we can build that parasympathetic nervous system
Hmm.
by experiencing it. So we have to get into a calm, relaxed state like every day and check in with yourself, because we've learned to disconnect from
Right.
ourselves. So we want to build, and that builds the neural pathways, and the body says, oh, she's paying attention to me. She's listening. She's feeling me, because this
Hmm.
is really what it's about, is feeling what's inside instead of letting it ignore it and push forward.
So, maybe we could do a little bit of a demonstration then.
Yeah.
Um, there isn't that much that generally that makes me really angry, but I do get angry at some of the things um, that are happening to people today. I get really angry. Like, I have a lot of friends who, um, are here from other countries, and the way we're treating people who are here probably legally, but we're making them feel completely threatened. We're changing the law on them, as we speak, and then rounding them up. The way we're treating transgender people as if they're not people, and I think like that gets me angry. The way we demean um, I get, well, minorities. Those are the things that get me angry. So if when I see something like that and I get triggered and I get really angry, can you
Yeah.
tell me?
Well, let's start with what do you notice first? Like, um, the milder symptoms might be a little tension in the jaw, fists might clench, butterflies in the stomach. You just might get this all over activation, jaw gets tight. That might be the beginning of noticing what
Yeah,
I'm
for me,
witnessing.
it's like it feel right here in the temples, and
Okay.
then of just a feeling of like anger and wanting to fight the people who are doing this.
And anger shows up in the body, usually in different places. So that's where I think we first start with you get into a more relaxed parasympathetic state, because in that place the body lets down and can let up the emotions that are being stuffed down or that we're not aware of. And some of the real simple things, and there's a whole playlist of simple ways to relax, but you could just breathe through your left nostril,
Hmm.
and there's a physiological response there. You can also inhale and exhale longer and until it's completed, and you might notice the body lets down, a physiological response. So there's some real simple things that you can do to try to calm yourself, and then the invitation is to get the body in a comfortable state. And usually you want to stop as many visual stuff coming in, because there's so much part of our brain that needs visual. So if we can stop visual and close our eyes and go inside, then I would invite you to go inside and notice where you're showing up. When you start to notice, and we start real early, like before you even know that you're going to be angry, but you're going to see something. Like, I'm just witnessing just before anything's happened, but I'm just starting to see this group of people, what shows up in your body.
Hmm.
And what do you notice as you're imagining, remembering a scenario that you might have walked into seeing?
Hmm.
Just as you're starting to see it, what showed up in your body?
So I will say that as we went and had me do those exercises of the breathing just out of the left nostril, or especially the slowing down the breathing and closing my eyes, like I'm feeling really, really calm. So, 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 so that worked on me here. I'll say that very often when I get those feelings of anger, I'm surrounded by other people, so it's not like I can close my eyes at that point. Um, I am, you know, uh, but I probably could going back to your thoughts. I probably could concentrating on my breath and slow down my breath and just focus on that for 15 seconds.
Mhm.
Would that be helpful?
That would. And what's really helpful about this kind of work is if you start to notice what first shows up
Hmm.
when you're remembering this scenario, as I'm walking into this
Yep.
possible, and what first shows up. Usually there's this energy that rises up, and we might it gets intense. But
Hmm.
what first shows up, because if we know what first shows up, then we can start noticing it
Hmm.
when we're in other situations. Oh, I just felt something that I recognize as familiar.
Hmm.
I'm about to be angry.
Hmm.
So that's why it's really important to start noticing that and have a safe place to feel it, because you don't have to complete it when it's right, when you're in the midst of it, but you will want to complete any anger that you've repressed later, which,
Right, and maybe even prepare for it. So if I
yeah.
know that I am a perfectionist, and like like when I have a project, like I'll work 4 hours or 6 hours on it because I want it to be perfect. If I know that that's my trait, I can say, something, the next time I feel this way, I'm going to take 5 or 10 deep breaths,
Mhm.
see if there are other alternatives. And so using that breath work, preparing for it in advance so that when the situation occurs, it's like I've already thought through the event. Oh my gosh, I feel like, I'm writing a book right now. So I feel like, I have to ignore dinner because I have to finish this chapter, because if I don't finish this chapter, and I get into that, and
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
wait a minute. Okay. I said to myself, when I feel this way, notice it. And now let me do 8 slow breaths. And then like, now what's important to me, and ask the question at that point.
Mm.
Right.
And that's really good. Definitely that. A nervous system that's easily activated,
Hmm.
like those of us from childhood trauma or didn't get built a good ventral vagal, and you know it, you fly off the handle.
Not
You're
me. I mean, other people do.
right,
I've
exactly.
never flown off the. If I do, it's because I'm right.
It's because that other
Right.
person made me do it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, so a nervous system will respond when it has time and space and feels safe. The environment around it is safe, which is why I help people create. What do you like? Do you like laying down? Do you like dark rooms? Do you like soft music? Do you like a certain temperature? Put everything in your surrounding to feel good, and then try breathing or stretching or go out in nature. But even if you take a break to
Mhm.
give your nervous system the breaths or a break, you get rejuvenated and the brain comes back online again, and you come from a different state of connectedness and centeredness, and clarity shows up and creativity shows up
Mhm.
because you're not pushing that nervous system into more overwhelm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, so I'm looking at the time, and we're actually about a minute over,
Okay.
but I do want to make sure that people know how to reach you.
Okay.
So actually, we probably both want to make sure that people know how to reach you. How would people get in touch with you? But let's say that they realize that, oh my gosh, I've always been a hyper pleaser. Oh my gosh, I fly off the handle. Oh my gosh, I suppress my anger. It would be really helpful to have somebody help me through that.
Mm.
Gee, I wonder if Sharon could help. What would they do?
Yeah. Yes. Well, you could start with my website, creatingserenitynow.com. We also have the online course, makingfriendswithforgiveness.com. And my YouTube channel at Sharon Laflamme. There's really not a way to get in touch with me, but there is an email, Sharon at creatingserenitynow.com, which are probably the best ways to reach me and get to know me, because there's so much help on the YouTube channel for anybody that says, "Oh wow, I have some of this," and I
Okay.
really,
Can you say
I
that
really
email address one more time and
sure.
slowly? Sharon at what?
Sharon at creatingserenitynow.com.
Okay.
Because there is a different place to live in your body that doesn't have to be anxious and stressful and overwhelmed. There's a whole different place to live that most of us didn't get built.
I think that's wonderful. So Sharon, like I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me
You
too.
calmed me down,
Oh,
so that was great. And you and I talk anyhow, so
yeah.
we'll talk soon.
We'll stay in touch. Thank
Okay.
you for the invitation. It was really a pleasure. And I hope that I get to meet some more of your followers.
I hope so. Okay. And I'm sorry.